Israel's battlefield going high-tech with some robotic warriors. Welcome to this News Hub Extra. I'm Simon Constable, and let's straight away go to Charles Levinson, who's standing by in Jerusalem with this very interesting story. Charles, tell us about these robotic warriors.
Well, Israel is among the world leaders in developing robotic unmanned combat systems. That includes unmanned boats that patrol the seas, unmanned ground vehicles, and unmanned aerial vehicles. And they're part of this growing movement into robotics in battle that we're seeing really around the world, but that Israel is sort of playing a pioneering role in to some degree.
Now, I've heard of the aerial vehicles, and they're sometimes called drones by some people. I haven't heard of the land ones. One of them you say is called the Guardian. Explain that, please.
Well, Israel deployed the Guardian, this unmanned ground vehicle, about 10 months ago along its borders with the Gaza Strip in the south and with Lebanon in the north. And the Guardian's a good example of how Israel has, really for the past 20, 30 years since it pioneered the unmanned aerial vehicle, how Israel has responded to sort of very real battlefield threats with unmanned robotic solutions. So in 2006, you had Israeli soldiers kidnapped both along the Gaza border and along the Lebanese border. And now, a couple of years later, last year, we have the Guardian deployed, which is basically an armored, muscled-up golf cart that drives itself really very autonomously along the border, patrolling for any signs of infiltrators or threats.
So this clearly the goal in this case is that there are less soldiers put at risk on the battlefield, and that's good for the deploying army. What's the longer-term goal? I mean, are there going to be many, many more of these?
There's no question that modern armies, the Israeli, the American, and others, are all moving increasingly into unmanned systems. In Israel, so I've heard an estimate that as many as 1/3 of Israel's combat vehicles will be unmanned within the next decade or two. And again, the U.S. is similar. The U.S. went into Iraq in 2003 with just a handful of unmanned aerial vehicles. Today, I think it has close to 20,000 unmanned aerial vehicles and ground vehicles, as part of its arsenal. That 2009 was the first year that the U.S. trained more pilots for unmanned vehicles or unmanned aerial vehicles than it did train for manned fighters and bombers. So that's a pretty powerful sign, I think, of the direction we're headed.
Now, I understand that the air, sea, and land vehicles can sort of work together and they can talk to each other. Can you explain that, please?
Well, so you could have a pilot sitting in Tel Aviv or in Oklahoma and Nevada, piloting an unmanned aerial vehicle, or increasingly in the future, they don't even need to be piloting it. These things can fly themselves, and flying over terrain. Down below, you'll have an unmanned ground vehicle on the ground operating, and the unmanned aerial vehicle will be, picking up threats, spotting threats, pinpointing coordinates, and the unmanned ground vehicles will be automatically following the directions from the unmanned plane to zero in and attack or do whatever it needs to do, on the ground.
Now, for any army that deploys such vehicles like this, the vehicles that can actually make decisions about when to shoot and when to attack, that presents some ethical issues. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, of course, the technology is already at a point where these unmanned vehicles, ground or air, can make decisions about, can detect threats on their own and can be programmed to fire without any human involvement. Now, all the designers and the armies itself that are involved say that there's always going to be human in the loop. But these robots are definitely capable of saying that person has can pick up a person on the ground carrying an AK-47, determine that AK-47's barrel is warm, therefore it's just been fired, know it's in the vicinity of where an attack just took place on U.S. troops, and automatically fire on U.S. or Israeli troops, whatever the case may be, and automatically fire at the threat without any human being involved. Now, obviously, that presents ethical dilemmas because if a robot kills an innocent civilian, do you blame the software programmer who wrote the software? Do you blame the officer who deployed it? Where does this fit into the laws of war?
Yeah, it's an interesting question and a big one. And I guess if we take in the realms of science fiction, maybe these robots actually eventually turn on their masters and shoot them. Obviously, I hope not. But anyway, thank you very much. That's Charles Levinson with the Wall Street Journal in Jerusalem. And I'm Simon Constable here in New York. And that's the News Hub for now. We'll be back later with more breaking news.